I'd not say I'd steer it. I was simply just talking about what I was most excited about, right? Hey, you sold your company. Cool. What are you going to do now? Honestly, I think I'm going to go buy apartment buildings. What? That was effectively how it went, Michael.
Yeah. Dan and Greg, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Michael. Great to be here.
Great to be here, Michael. Thanks for having us.
Great to see you guys. So, first of all, you guys are all full-time. Before we go into how you did that, because everyone wants to know, oh my gosh, how do I, quit my job or exit whatever I'm doing? Tell us about your last day. What were you doing when you basically exited whatever you were doing? Greg, why don't you go first? What was that day like?
First, Michael. So, ironically, my last day was the day that I flew out to Dealmaker Live last year. So on my last day, I had a couple calls in the morning. It was kind of a bittersweet day because I had spent 14 years building my career at the same firm. And I was going to stay on part-time for a few months, but it was my last full-time day. And then later that afternoon, I got on a flight to Dallas to go to Dealmaker Live with Dan.
So what was going, how did people react to you, your coworkers, your friends, your family, when this happened?
Yeah, they were definitely shocked. I walked away from a long career and a long tenure at a firm. And I think people were just shocked that I was walking away from stability of a good job and healthy income, and sort of my default future at that firm was going to be very positive. It was going to be a lucrative career, and people were just shocked that I would leave that and didn't have something lined up, as they call it, right?
What career did you throw away, Greg?
I started entry level 14 years ago in a consulting firm, so we do business optimization for large companies. So the last few years of my tenure there, I was a partner and an executive with a large team and big name clients all over the country. A demanding job that, I learned a lot from, and ultimately decided that the second half of my career, I wanted to be different.
So people were shocked when you announced that you would leave. But what was that like? Was that like, yeah, awesome? Or was it really like disconcerting? Was it fun? Like, what was that like?
It was exciting for me, but it was also bittersweet. I still do have a lot of great relationships with the people that I was in the trenches with for all those years. I still keep in touch with everyone, but I think it was one of those, once I decided that I was going to go a different direction, they were excited for me, but also it's sad because our relationship will never be the way that it was when we were working together so closely. So ultimately, bittersweet, I'd say.
Did anyone ask you how you did it? And more importantly, did anybody express enough curiosity to try to walk in your footsteps?
Absolutely. People are very intrigued and curious, and it's fun to talk about, right? So it's like one of the reasons I'm doing is because, people ask me what I'm doing and what I'm going to be doing. I light up, right? I'm so excited to talk to people about it. So I got to tell my story to all sorts of people, and continue to as people reach out to say what I'm doing now. So absolutely.
That's pretty cool. Daniel, what's your story? How was that like, that transition?
Yeah, I would have to say bittersweet as well. For me, that was I built a company over a 9-year period, had a lot of success. Again, just like Greg, it was a big time job that we were making very lucrative and had a good long-term path, but it just wasn't aligned with my, goals long-term. So the reality was same exact answer there. Bittersweet. Folks were curious as to where I was going and why I would quote unquote throw away, a company I spent 8 years building.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. Why would you throw something away? Like, you both, spent years, decades building up careers. Greg, why would you consider throwing something like that away? You said stability, comforts, paycheck, lifestyle. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, ultimately it came down for me is I had determined, kind of in lots of conversations with my wife and this executive coaching group that I'm in, that, what do I want my life to be like? And I wanted to be having dinner with my family more often. I wanted to be coaching my kids' soccer teams. I wanted to be a more present dad and husband. So when I look at the second half of my career, it's like, how can I have more time freedom to be able to achieve big things in business, but also do it on my terms in terms of like my time freedom. So, like a lot of people, I was chasing what's on your shirt, Michael, freedom, right? Freedom of my time and my calendar. So ultimately that's it. It was about what did I want the second half of my career to be like? And that's what I started to chart out.
Now, what allowed you to do that? Because there's one thing wanting something, okay? Wanting freedom, wanting more money, wanting a better body, whatever, okay? Something. But what sets you apart from maybe some people who would not be prepared to do that? How did you overcome that gravity force, that black hole, that status quo that wanted to suck you back in?
Yeah, I was in that phase for a long time, Michael, where I was reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, and analysis paralysis phase. But what started to move me in the right direction was just, what are the little actions that I can take? And for me, it was reaching out to people who were on podcasts. At the end, when you'd say, how can people get a hold of you? I started to do that. So I just started to try to have a meeting a month in the beginning with people that were already doing it. And then I got a lot of energy from those conversations. So I would do a couple meetings a month with people who were already doing it that I had, met through podcasts or other people in the area that were doing multifamily full time. And that started to create a lot of momentum in those relationships.
Interesting. Yeah, momentum is everything. And it sounds like for you and for me and maybe others listening, well, you start momentum by doing little tiny things and building on top of that. Daniel, how were you able to overcome that? Because here's the thing. I mean, I talk to a lot of people all the time who say they want one thing or another, and they never really are able to break free. And I think one of the reasons is that if your current life ain't so bad, you have really strong, almost overwhelming plan B. And so when you embark on anything in life and it gets a little hard, you're like, that was for the birds anyway. And you go back to what was plan B now is plan A. How were you able to escape that?
Yeah, I looked at it really as a graduation moment rather than a throwing away, right? It was a desire to play on a bigger stage. I had experienced freedom in my life. I had, financial lucrative outcomes, and I'd had some schedule freedom, in my day owning a business. But the reality was I was still attached, to a desk and responding. So really it was about changing my beliefs. And knowing that there was something better out there. And for me, heavily coached and mentored, and a lot of great feedback from a lot of folks said, Dan, the way you're making money seems like a really tough way to do it. I think there's easier ways to do it. Maybe owe it to yourself and your family to explore some other options rather than just committing to the one path that you committed to 8 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. What are some of the other mindset issues, limiting beliefs, false beliefs, Greg, that you were dealing with when you started getting into real estate? So let's rewind the clock a little bit more. What were you dealing with when you first started thinking about real estate or even apartment buildings? What were some of those beliefs that you were struggling with at the time?
Yeah, the beliefs was I didn't have enough experience or knowledge to be able to do it. Who am I to talk to this broker about acquiring a property, having never done it before? So, that was a big one. So I just thought if I read more books and listen to more podcasts, I'll eventually get the knowledge I need to be able to have that conversation. And that just wasn't right. So one of the mindset things that we still talk about really every week, Dan and I, is I'm not going to be the reason why this doesn't happen, or we're not going to be the reason why this doesn't happen. So we just say, what do we need to do to not be the reason this doesn't happen? So that puts the ball in our court to look in the mirror and say, what do we need to do to make this happen? So, it was just to get that confidence to be able to take those little steps.
So you're not even asking how to do something necessarily. You're just saying what needs to happen, and you're not spending as much time on the how. Did I hear you right? Exactly.
And basically, how do we do everything in our power to make sure this happens? If some outside force is the reason why this doesn't happen, maybe the broker says no or the bank says no, great, but let's not be the reason why it doesn't happen. So let's do everything that we're supposed to do to try to move the ball forward.
So get out of your own way a little bit. And I think, for analytical people, like myself, I need to figure out how sometimes to make things happen. And that sometimes holds me back from proceeding. Absolutely. Because I don't have all the answers on the same. So when I find myself moving forward without all the answers, that's when I can move forward. Otherwise, I might say, I don't have all the answers, and so I'm going to hold back. Daniel, what were you struggling with? What are some or one or two things that stand out for you?
Yeah, and related to, to the investing we're doing now, it really was the scale of it. So I had history of owning single family homes. I had a portfolio of we had 7 homes at one point across 2 states. So I had a taste of passive income and the financial rewards of real estate investing. But the idea of moving from, I was prepared to go to a duplex and a triplex, right? But the famous story amongst Greg and I and our firm is that we were on a neighborhood walk with some buddies around the hood. And at the end of this walk, I told Greg about my plan of selling a couple of single families and then buying a triplex locally. By the way, we live in Newport Beach, where a triplex sells at 300 to 700K per door. So, my idea was, how could I ever go to anything larger than that? Greg's exact phrase was, what I would do? I'd lock up a 100-unit building and figure it out. And that phrase, that concept of like, lock up a 100-unit building, like, what are you talking about? But the reality was, Michael, that was a matter of hours, maybe days before that belief was completely shattered, partially from your book and from some other folks that have done this. And I just all of a sudden, that belief was changed overnight to, of course I can do that. We just got to put the energy to it and make it happen.
It's amazing how you can expand your comfort zone. And I've had a similar experience. Just simply walking a large building literally it's the same as years and years of flipping houses or doing something. Because flipping houses is a very slow process. And even and you have now, I flipped houses, you held some houses. It really doesn't get you there. I mean, even 3, 4, 5 years of single family house investing still doesn't get your mind. But then touring a 100-unit building, very quickly, you're like, 25-unit looks small all of a sudden, just because I looked at a 100-unit building. And there's hacks like that you don't come up with that kind of stuff yourself. You either read it or you hear it, or you have a coach or mentor just suggest these things. And it's surprising how you can, I would say, play with your mind and very, and hack your mind almost in that way. Greg, how did you overcome that lack of experience? I mean, this comes into play when you're, for example, calling brokers. A lot of people will like, well, I can't analyze deals because I don't have deals to look at, because they'd have to talk to a broker to get a deal. And there's this fear of talking to brokers or even investors. And how did you overcome that fear?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a partnership with Dan that really helped me with some of that confidence, is being able to have somebody quickly to do a little prep call with. Hey, I'm going to call this broker today. Here's the deal. Can we run through it real quick? Just to be able to have somebody throughout the day to like bounce ideas off of and do it, call it a quick dry run of how the call should go, what the conversation is going to be like. That was helpful for me. So just not to be in my own head, have somebody to give you some advice, some affirming thoughts. That was a big thing. So the partnership with Dan has really been helpful. And then mentorship. I mean, Dan is very action oriented. So when I sort of gave him this idea to do larger investing and pointed him in the right direction, he was off to the races, Michael, and he was signed up for the mentor. So we benefited tremendously also from the mentorship program to be able to also have those calls with our mentor to be able to say, here's where we're at. What else do we need to consider? Make sure we were just covering all our bases.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like, Dan, you're kind of an action taker, even though you credit Greg with the idea.
That's correct. That's exactly where it's at. And I think that's part of how the partnership works. And I'll say, Michael, for me, it was about, transitioning the skills that I had from a previous business and just moving them over right to this business. It's sales, raising money, operations, same thing as managing my team. I used to manage a P&L and had a credit line for the business. I now have a P&L and a debt, service for my building. So it was just a matter of transitioning those over, but importantly, having a mentor and having other folks in the business that could just help you get over that chasm, right? That little difference, that little nuance that you need to understand. Greg and I did a great job of recruiting people to give us that advice and help us get over those hurdles.
How did you guys find each other?
Long story there. Actually, 10 plus years ago, I did an engagement for Greg's firm. We partnered together on a deal. And then I guess the best part of the story is we had run into each other a few other times, but we purchased homes about 6 doors down from each other, completely unaware that we were doing so. So we now live, a couple 100 feet away, and families are integrated, and it's a good thing.
That's pretty cool. So who came to whom first about getting into apartment buildings? Was that the idea man, Greg, or was that maybe you?
That was Greg on the apartments. That was Greg, I think, came to me a couple years ago about my single family portfolio, interested into how that worked. And again, he was already on the idea of apartments first, right? He was going to skip the single family thing. And so he was looking at my experience in single family, and I was looking at him like, what's this apartment thing? So
Greg, how were you able to skip the single family house? Obviously, Daniel and many other people aren't able to do that. Like, no, I need to do this first. It's a stepping stone. And you're like, no, I don't think so. What gave you the confidence from a mental perspective to skip that step?
Just all the content I had been consuming, Michael. I had listened to so many people's stories, Bigger Pockets, and then your podcast on learning that lesson through other people. So I learned from other people that, they had realized even after they had done a lot of single family investing, it wasn't scalable. But I was headed down that path. I was making some offers on some single family homes back in Iowa, thinking that's what my path was going to be. And then as I was learning, I kind of pulled back on that and said, well, no, that's not really the path. So I then shifted to investing as an LP in multifamily deals when I learned about syndication. So skipped single family, went to LP investing, and that's how I was able to also learn before I was becoming active in it.
So you guys got together before that first deal, is that right?
Yep.
So how did you go about then looking for that first deal, raising money? Talk about your first deal.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. So first one was, I had an exit from my business and was effectively free for a number of months and was, building up the courage to make this my full-time endeavor. Greg and I were obviously communicating constantly during that time, and a deal came up locally with another sponsor that had locked up a great deal, built a great business plan, and he had had years of institutional experience as an employee of a larger fund. However, a couple weeks away from closing, he was short on capital. So the invitation came to Greg and I that if you guys could fill up the $800,000 that we're missing, then we'd invite you to the GP team and you can have an active role in managing the property long term. It was local building, so this just checked so many boxes. So Greg and I said, all right, let's go for it. And then that's when action-oriented Dan went in. I called 30 of my best friends, told them what I was going to be investing in and saw if they had any interest in it. 5 days later, a number of referrals later, we had all that capital verbally committed to and progressed into that becoming our first deal.
So a lot of times people are very anxious to raise capital because obviously they've never done it before. And then they are very hesitant to ask friends and family because they're afraid to lose someone else's money. How did you prepare for that? I mean, it sounded like you just started pick up the phone and calling. Did you have any kind of training, or did you practice on your friends first? How did you leg into that?
Yeah, honestly, the phrase that I said, and I said it with total honesty and still say it today, I'm going to be investing this deal, and this is why. Maybe you should consider it too. As simple as that, right? So that first deal, sure, there was trepidation and not a full understanding of the deal like I understand them now. But the reality is I was putting my own hard-earned money into that deal. I believed in the deal, and I was sharing with a number of folks what I was doing. And the reality, Michael, it wasn't, hey, that's cool. The response was, whoa, what? Where's that? Can I see the OM as well? Wait a second. You're going to put how much in? Yeah, let's have a meeting around that. So that was what happened. I come from a sales background. I'm used to reaching out. I'm reaching to pick up the phone. And if someone's not interested, I can take that. But the reality is everyone was interested and everybody wanted to tell their friends about it. So it caught a lot of momentum, and that's how we got over that hurdle of capital raising. So much momentum. So
when you raised capital, how did you go about it? I mean, obviously you had a very unique angle. Say, hey, I think you mentioned the word sharing. You were sharing that you're investing in an apartment building deal. Yep. And I mean, to what degree did you try to close down your friend or family member? How did that conversation go? Give us an example of that.
Sure. First of all, we never close. It's not a sales game. So instead, what occurred was something I called the 100 Coffee campaign. And this was prior to my decision to go full scale into real estate. It was really just a way for me to, hey, I'm in a pause in my career. I'm going to reinvent myself. Might as well go have coffee with 100 interesting people, tell them what I'm up to, and see what's going on. I had a belief that opportunities would be created through those meetings regardless. So I went in with just authentic interest in them. And I wanted to tell them what I was doing. And, out of those first 30 coffees, apartment investing came up every single time. This is something I'm doing. This is something I'm moving toward. And every single person wanted to hear more. Every single person wanted to introduce me to someone that they knew. And therefore, there was never a sales conversation or closing. I'm doing this. I'm excited about it. Hey, Dan, we like you and we trust you. Let's do it too.
So apartments came up every single time. Was that coincidence, or did you perhaps steer the conversation?
I don't say I'd steer it. I was simply just talking about what I was most excited about, right? Hey, you sold your company. Cool. What are you going to do now? Honestly, I think I'm going to go buy apartment buildings. What? That was effectively how it went, Michael.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: a lot of people get confused by raising money because you think that you're closing people, begging people, manipulating people, but really you're sharing your enthusiasm, right? And so I love that. I love the 100 coffee with 100 interesting people, right? Because it's a way to catch up, and of course, apartments is now a part of that, and it'll invariably come up in your story because people want to know what's new with you. And I think that's a really, really non-threatening way to raise money. So you guys, now, Greg, how do you guys split your partnership, roles, responsibilities between the two of you?
Yeah, so I'm probably more focused on the acquisition side. I really enjoy the broker conversations and underwriting the deals. We do a lot of that together, but I'll take the first pass at almost every deal we underwrite, and then I'll have Dan sort of stress test it. And we'll go through it together. So I'm more on the front end of acquisitions, broker relationships, and underwriting. Whereas Dan's, got his newsletter. He's leading the charge on that capital raise, but also I'm very involved in helping him in that asset too, or in that part of the business as well.
So what I like about that is you guys have clear delineation of roles, and I've seen partnerships not work so well because everybody was involved in everything, and just there's no clear accountability. Now you mentioned a newsletter, Dan. Why are you doing a newsletter?
I started that in a prior business. I developed a monthly newsletter as a way to touch base and keep in contact with customers. After I left, it was the same idea with the 100 coffees. I wanted a way to continue to connect and put my face and story with people that I knew and I liked. So I started writing a little 300, 500 word blurb about something that I was learning in my life. That started to get a lot of positive feedback and has gained some momentum. So now we're coming up on it'll be my 12th episode this next month. And it's very powerful, and it's brought a lot of our investors to us. It's a natural magnet and conversation starter.
So how so? In other words, why are you doing? Because it obviously takes a lot of time to think about topics, write the topics. What do you think it's doing for your business?
Yeah, I think what it does is it aligns me with people who believe the things that I believe. So, for example, last newsletter was about blinders on, focus, and having total conviction around what you're doing. So that lands in the inbox of people who are in the middle of their workday and they're struggling with their conviction or they're struggling with focus, and they go, yeah, I agree with that. I need to have blinders on. And that's just naturally, Michael, it's just, I like Dan. I trust Dan. I want to hear more about Dan. And that's just how it continues to go. So I get a lot of responses with, hey, that was perfectly timed. I really needed that input. And then I will put just a couple of sentences at the bottom of every newsletter, updating what I'm doing in my professional life. So, hey, we have apartment investing happening. We're doing this business over here. If you want to learn more, contact me.
That's cool. And then how are you getting referrals? Because you mentioned referrals, and I think that's key because even if you hang out or you reach out with friends and family and people say, well, yeah, I'm out. Like, how do I expand my network? And referrals, of course, is the secret to doing that. How do you approach your investors or friends and family? How do you get referrals out of them?
Greg and I both have a mentor that we share and a life coach. And one of his famous phrases is that your success will be defined by the stories that influential people tell about you because you've earned their trust. The stories that influential people have told about you because you've earned their trust. And honestly, Michael, that's it. Like, I go about every day looking to earn trust and be worthy of people telling stories about me. And I found that if they do that, naturally opportunities, referrals, and the phone rings.
Yeah. So is there anything you do actively? And I agree with you. If you're a trustworthy person, people like and trust you, they're going to talk about you more. Is there anything tactically that you do to maybe encourage that?
Sure. I think two things. One is that just bring a lot of authentic energy to a conversation and about a subject. And then two is that I'm just naturally curious and I really love hearing about other people. So I ask a lot of questions. And I think in an average conversation, I spend less than 50% of the time talking. I love hearing other people. And I think that natural curiosity combined with the enthusiasm and authentic enthusiasm, it's non-threatening and people have a natural tendency and they want to share that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, Greg, you do a lot of acquisitions here. So after your first deal, you guys raised $800,000. You're now a GP. You see kind of how the deal goes down. You're maybe doing some asset management, a site visit. You've learned a lot. What have you done, or what are you doing right now on the acquisition side?
Yeah, so we co-GP'd 3 times before we decided then to go be the lead sponsor on our own deal. So I guess I'll start with when we decided to go. We learned what we were going to learn from the 3 projects we did as co-GPs, and we said we're either going to be capital raisers who join other people's deals, or we're going to go find our own deals. So that was a critical part in our business, where we said, okay, now we got to find a market, and we have to. We believe that one or two maybe markets, going deep into those markets, will give us a competitive advantage. So we set on this path of weeks and months to find our market. So that was the first step, and we were underwriting every single deal in those markets, building those relationships with the brokers, visiting those markets, and then just being patient for one to eventually, meet all of our criteria.
Cool. How did you go about finding that market? Because there's so many great markets in America.
Yep.
How did you?
So I'm from Iowa originally.
Yep.
I like Des Moines, Iowa. I went to college 30 minutes north of Des Moines. Still have family there. I was biased. I think Des Moines is a great tertiary market that's growing significantly. Dan's from Jacksonville, the Jacksonville area, originally went to college there. So we started there where we had existing relationships. I had to be sold on Jacksonville, and Dan had to be sold on Des Moines. So we sort of studied them independently and compared notes and realized, wow, these are two good markets that are in different phases of their sort of market cycle. And then Des Moines happens to be the market where we've gotten the most traction. We've done some deals.
Awesome. So you're in two markets, Des Moines and Jacksonville. Is that correct?
We're focused on those two markets primarily. We haven't done a deal in Jacksonville yet, but we're continually, we're long on Jacksonville. So we're going to stay focused on it.
So when you said you haven't getting any traction yet, how do you again go up? How do you approach a market? So you do a bunch of, now you narrowed it down because for subjective reasons and personal reasons, which I think is smart, because otherwise you can throw darts at a spreadsheet all day long. So you narrowed it down, but then how do you actually get into a market? How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, we visited it, right? So after we studied it and realized that we liked all the metrics about it, the population growth, the employment diversity, all the good things that you want to see in a market, we visited it. We spent 4 or 5 days there. We met all the brokers in person. We met several banks in person, reconnect with a lot of people that I know to kind of share the story of what we're going to be doing, and then just stay consistent, Michael. It's provide feedback to brokers on their deal, underwrite everything that's on the market that's close to your buy box, and then just be consistent with the activity in that market.
What do you mean by consistent?
I mean, every day I was making a call to either a bank or a broker to ask them, how it's going, what are they seeing in the market, anything new that they're working on that's off market. Just try to build those authentic relationships. And so we're doing it full time. It's kind of like, everybody wants to try to get on the broker's list of people they bring off market deals to. My experience is that's not really how it works. They have so many people in their database, in their mind, in their sort of phone, that most of the opportunities that I've gotten from brokers that are off market, if you will, are just because like the time was right. I was standing in a parking lot after looking at a deal with them, or happened to call them at the right time where they're like, what, actually, I just got off the phone with this owner who's thinking about it. Or actually, there's this one that I heard is going to. So it's just more organic in that consistent communication and dialogue with the market where they're coming up, versus like you're all of a sudden on this list that, you get the magical off-market deals emailed to you. So it's about being consistent so I can stay on their radar.
It always surprises me how brokers suck at their job. Like they don't call you. They get a deal. They're like, oh, let me call Greg and Dan. It's right in their buy box. Oh, yes. No, they don't call you. It's like buy the buy. So you got anything? No. What about this submarket? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, sure. I didn't think of that. Like
exactly.
It puzzles me how they actually are getting deals done. So if it's not you being consistent and talking to them all the time, no one would ever do any kind of deal. So that's pretty cool. So what have you guys done since then? So you co-GP'd 3, which means you raised capital for another operator, and then you went out on your own. So what have you guys done since then on your own?
Dan, I'll let you talk about our first Des Moines deal.
Sure. Yeah. So since then, our first big acquisition in Des Moines was 216 units across 2 properties. Really fun story there. We found a property that was on market, and we did something creative that I think I stole from one of your modules, which was to create a video offer. So I made a commentary and I showed my underwriting and I said, here's my offer. I think this is a fair price given what I know. And I said, if I'm missing something, please let me know. That ended up getting a call back from a broker. Hey, that's interesting. The seller wants to know more. Long story short, Michael, that ended up getting a loan assumption on a 3.2% note with 4 years left on a under market, on a value add deal. And then that seller, we interviewed and flew out and met with, and he actually decided to put another property down the street that was off market. So then it became a portfolio purchase. On top of that, Greg and I really, we think we're more boardroom guys than hammer swinging guys, right? So we really tried our best to optimize the deal structure, found some great partners there. So the sellers actually became JV partners on the deal long-term, put money into the deal, helped us guarantee the loan. And they're now operational partners in the Des Moines market that we're doing other deals with. Since then, we bought another 108 unit portfolio with them and are currently under contract on another 120 units that when LOI was accepted last week.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see the law of the first deal really going in effect here. I mean, certainly it was precipitated by your co-GPing, right? But once you do that first deal in a market, it's like lights out, which is awesome. And back to your point, you creating a Loom video. Yes, it's in our course, obviously, but it's another way you can stand out from the rest of the crowd. I bet you no one is sending a Loom video, and these brokers probably sent it to the seller. And now the seller said, "Oh, these guys are pretty cool. They sound intelligent. They're serious. They have a good team around them." And so that one thing then led to another and another, and to these off-market deals, which is just it's just awesome. So what's next for you guys here? What are your plans moving forward over the next 2-3 years?
Well, we really like the beachhead that we have in Des Moines. We have great partners, and we now are finally, Michael, getting off-market deals. Again, we thought it was after one deal you might get them. No, it's after you're a known entity in a market, right? So we're now getting true off-market deal flow in Des Moines with some pretty attractive opportunities. And the other one is we're hardcore on Jacksonville. We like the fundamentals. We just think it's overpriced and has been overpriced. So we're going to continue to underwrite deals and provide feedback. And as soon as we have a property that hits our buy box and our metrics, we're going to be very quick to purchase and start doing the same thing in Jacksonville.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what do you guys think is your biggest challenge right now, Greg? What do you think?
Oh, biggest challenge. I think it's deal flow. Since we're doing this full time, especially, we get a little antsy in between deals because we're doing everything we can, but there's only so much you can do. You don't want to force a deal. So we want to stay really patient and sort of disciplined with our underwriting. So that's been the biggest challenge is, when we're not under contract on something, being patient and disciplined with getting into that next deal. Make sure that we don't stretch. It's easy to get excited for me, especially about a deal, trying to find a way to make it work, get creative. How could this work? So it's just being patient and being consistent with our activities that are going to lead to deals. But patience isn't one of my strengths in terms of because we burned the boats, Michael. Right? We've got some urgency around.
I know it. You
making
got to
this
pay the
happen
bills
and building our business. So we can't force it.
Dan, what about one other challenge you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, it is the deal flow and getting things to underwrite. So I'll just go deeper into that, which is that we have a really strong commitment to ourselves and our investment thesis that the properties will cash flow in the first year, which means you have to buy on positive leverage, which means I have to buy at a cap rate higher than my lending. And if lending is at 6%, that means I'll be buying at 6 or 7% cap rates. That's a challenge. However, they are there. And so again, it's a lot of patience. I think after that, Greg and I we're scaling up our visions into what kind of properties, we can purchase. And it's those strategic capital partners to not fund a $5 million purchase, but a $50 or $100 million purchase, as we move forward. So finding more of those large strategic capital partners that understand our thesis and agree with it, that's going to be the other, big hurdle we'll clear.
So Greg, parting advice, someone's listening to this or maybe watching on YouTube going, man, I surely would like to do something that you guys have done. What's your advice to that person?
My advice is to network, to get out and meet people who are already doing it. Build relationships with people that are doing it. I mean, that's what my story was. I reached out to somebody at the end of a podcast who said, here's how you get a hold of me. And I just asked them to go to coffee. So my advice is to get to know people who are already doing what you see yourself doing in the future and just build a relationship and learn from them.
Yeah. Love it. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to take that Robert Kiyosaki advice, which is work to learn rather than work to earn. As you're starting off, if you don't own apartment buildings, why don't you do a deal where you don't make as much, right? You do more work and you learn in the process, and then you can become an expert. That's what we did early on to get into the business. So that's definitely my advice. Work to learn. So
what you're saying is when you co-GP, for example, maybe you got a little less than you think was fair?
I think it was fair, but we definitely had a minority position, right? Nowhere near, right? Someone else had the majority of that cap table, correct? Whereas now we're in a position of having
and
it.
That's actually really, really good, because that value of that first deal far outweighs any money you could possibly make from that first deal.
Dramatically. That's the lesson. The learnings that happened in that first deal far outweigh any money that we'll ever make on that deal.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's cool. How can people connect with you and network with you?
You know what? We're not really active social media guys. So honestly, LinkedIn's the best place. Dan Reilly. I'm on LinkedIn, and then also measuredcapital.com. We do have a website that shows a very small, showcase of what we've been doing. So for me, LinkedIn or our website. Greg?
LinkedIn for me as well, just Greg Danielson.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, it's great jamming with you guys. Thank you for sharing your story, how you guys got started and scale your portfolio. Super awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your help.